Hello everyone, this is Chris from Paint and Glory, and we're back again for a speed painting video this time. I've got my hands on some figures here. They're by Wake's Emporium. I'll have a link down in the description below. And these are the Warriors of the White Tree. They might look particularly familiar, especially if you take a look at the versions that have the tree on their shield, as kind of Gondorian-esque Lord of the Rings there. I'm going to be working on a Lord of the Rings project over the course of 2022. You've already seen some of my Rohirrim on the channel before, but I looked at these figures and I thought these have a chance for some real quick speed painting. Now you notice I've already done a couple of quick steps here. First was I primed these black, although I actually primed these a very, very dark gray. It doesn't really matter. I used German Panzer Gray, a very, very dark gray, through an airbrush. If you use whatever can of black or very, very dark gray you have is fine. Then I went ahead and the only area of skin that you can really see on these figures, because they are very heavily armored, is within their helmets. Now, it's very difficult to get into the helmet without getting it on the helmet using barbarian flesh here. So the step that I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a little bit of a matching color, which is just German gray. It's pretty much a one-to-one match to their dark gray primer, and go in there and just clean up the parts of the helmet that got flesh on them. Doesn't need to be perfect. These are going to be fielded as a mass, and you can certainly give your main characters a little bit more work compared to these rank and file troops. And right now it's pretty hard for the camera to pick up on what's going on here because it is just black on black on black. But as soon as we go into the very next step, things will become very clear. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to do the rest of these. And the next step is really 10% of the work, but 90% of the look. Now, once again, here's where we take one basic color, because these figures are mostly one color. In this case, that's metallic. They're wearing heavy armor. They're Gondorians. We're going to take plate mail metal from the army painter, take whatever medium silverish, metalish steel color that you want, and we are going to dry brush it. Now, I'm just going to use this cheap makeup brush I've been using forever. It's absolutely the snot beat out of it. It doesn't really matter. Take it, get some on there, wipe most of it off. I like to test it on the edge of this coat cap or the seltzer cap to see what I'm getting. A little hard to pick up on screen. And then start dry brushing from the top to the bottom, and you'll immediately see these figures are no longer black. They're wearing armor. And that's it. That is about 10% of the effort in this process, and 90% of the effect comes from this quick little dry brush. And all of the recesses remain black, and that's fine, because if you look at photos of Gondorians, especially from the movies, because, well, where else are you going to get photos of Gondorians? The cloth that they wear is a very, very dark gray black, and everything else is just shadow. Now, we are going to go back and clean up some of the areas that should be cloth. And we're going to do some of the things like hit their spear halves with a brown. But this is most of it. Might need to get a little more on, although to be honest, if you're ranking these up, you don't really need to worry about the back of your front rank all that much. And there you go. The Gondorians look, well, Gondorian already. You could probably just put these on the tabletop, although the spear halves might look a little silly, but we're going to do a couple other things to make them look good, so we'll see what that is. The last required step in speed painting these Gondorians is going to be the spear halves, because as black with a little bit of silver on them, they're a bit lacking. I'm going to be using the light umber color from Procryl by Monument Hobbies, but you can use literally whatever brown paint floats your boat here. Get a small brush, and you're just going to go in, and especially this figure here on the end, where his spear is the most exposed, you want to be the most careful with it. And the area that's kind of in between his head and the spear haft is not touched by the dry brush. It's still the pure black primer, so you don't really need to worry about getting in there. It's still left as shadow. I can't even really show you an angle where you see it because it's shadow. the key thing here is anywhere where the dry brush touched, people are going to be able to see. So you want to make sure that you hit this and cover it up. You don't have to worry about going too far in to the minis because anywhere super deep is simply not going to be seen. If you want to go and hit the haft of the spear in between the shields, I kind of angle it to go in. Oh, and there I just got some on the shield because I'm going with this camera. If you do get some on the shield, what I do is I clean off my brush, or you can use separate brush, leave it kind of wet, and then flood the area and keep wicking that now brownish paint water away. Well, it's still wet. You can never tell it was there. Now you know how to fix that. I'm going to clean up the center areas off camera because it's too hard to do it on camera. But all the areas that are visible, you can hit pretty quickly. And again, if you know you're going to be ranking these up, you don't even necessarily need to do the backs of the bottom of these spears because no one's ever going to see them unless they're in the back rank of a unit. So you can save some time if you plan out which of the strips are going into which base. You can save some time by not painting certain parts of the figures. We could stop here. I'm going to go a couple steps further, especially on some of the figures that have, of course, the shields on their, well, the trees on their shields. So we'll come back after this dries. Now the next two steps are optional. You really could call it a day here, but I think they are going to make the miniature look better. First, there are details in the faces, although they're hard to see, especially you can see some lips in there. So I'm going to apply just a dab of a flesh wash into the recesses where the face is, and that'll give just a little bit of extra definition to these soldiers. If I had wanted to skip this, I maybe would have started with a darker skin tone. I think the army painter color would have been tanned flesh, whereas here I used barbarian flesh, and then it would have looked more like the natural shadow of a face within the helmet. But this just takes a second. The other thing I'm going to do is the only real piece of exposed cloth that you can tell on them is these little tunicky bits hanging out the back, and right now you can see that it picked up some of the dry brushing of the metal. Now, the recesses of this are still black from the primer. So, if you don't want to leave that as metal, you can just take a gray color. In this case, I'm going to be using uniform gray. And you can just paint this over where the metal hit the cloak. And then when that dries, you're going to have, you've covered up the metal, but you have highlighted the little tunicky thing so that it looks like it's a dark gray tunic that's darker in the shadows where the primer was, but a little lighter up top. Some of these figures, the tunic is really only exposed in a couple of places, so this only takes a second to hit these one or two raised edges on the outside of the tunic, and boom, we're a business. It adds a little bit of variety to these figures. Now this figure is done at that point because there's really no other details to do here. But some of the other figures that Wakes Emporium made have got these little trees on them. And then we also have some command bases with flags and figures with some fancy filigreed helmets and horns and hair. So we got to talk about how to paint those as well. I'm going to finish up the rest of the tunics here, and then we'll talk about the fancy figures. Now, I've experimented for about an hour to see if there's any way that I can try to speed paint these trees. And there really isn't. I tried washes, I tried everything. Everything comes out kind of muddy and gray. So if there is one flaw in speed painting these white tree Gondorian-esque figures, it is the tree itself. If you really want to speed paint these figures, make sure that you're painting the ones that don't come with the trees on them, or just leave the trees. They've got dry brush silver, they're going to pick up, you can see them if you look at them, not really a big deal. If you do want to paint the trees, what I'm going to recommend is take your white of choice. I really like Prochryl's Bold Titanium White. It's fantastic. I really don't even need to thin it. And then take a tiny brush, because this is going to require some eye dotting skills, and I'm not going to promise I'm going to get this right on camera. And you really just need to take your time picking out the little details on these trees. I mean, there are little tree root areas down on the bottom of this tree that I'm not sure I'm going to be able to pick out. But that's okay. This is 10 millimeter. Maybe your hero character, you really go all out on that. And then just pick out the tree, trying to turn my brush so the sharp tip is vertical rather than horizontal to the model. And then there's even the little points of the Gondorian star on the top, and then right here, right there. Oh, that's tough. All right, I think I got that. And then the other side of the tree. Not something you want to do with the camera in between you and your figure. And then I lost, during the course of my experiments, I lost the metallic sheen on these little points right here. So I'm going to go back in and just put a dot of metal there and here and over on that side as well. For the rest of the details, as you can see, I've already painted them. Flesh on his figure, flesh wash on the face of that figure. I used the same brown as on the spear halves here, but then I applied an Agrax Earthshade to the hair, so it's a dark brown. You could really use whatever color you want. And then for the gold here, what I use is I use the Vallejo Old Gold, and then I hit that with the same flesh wash as the face, and it turns it kind of this reddish golden color. And the flag, I did the same with the Vallejo's German gray as its base color. And then I highlighted it up with a mix of the German gray and the uniform gray. And then I could try to freehand something on here, but there's so much waviness on it that freehanding this three-dimensional wavy flag would be very difficult. I really just kind of wanted to clean it up because it had some of the metallic dry brush on it. And that's it. That's your Gondorians. That's how you could paint them and have a really fantastic force for whatever rule set that you want to do with them. I hope this was helpful. If you really want to speed paint this, don't worry about the trees. They're going to really add on the time. Or you could just do trees on the front ranks, and you could do no trees, either the blank ones like these, or just leave the trees silver on the back ranks, or maybe just the hero units get the white trees for a real speed painting challenge. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments below. Next up, I'm looking at possibly doing some Forces of Mordor, Wolf Riders, or other wolf figures. There aren't any official figures for those, but I have some fairly decent looking non-GW styled orcs. They're actually supposed to be hobgoblins, but I think they work really well, and so I'll show those off next. Let me know if you have any questions, and as always, keep on painting.